Every society has to answer a really big question. When someone's accused of a crime, how do you actually figure out the truth? Today, we're diving into two ancient and wildly different answers. One was literally carved in stone, and the other, well, that one was left up to the gods. I mean, seriously, think about it for a second. If you were accused of something you didn't do, what would you do? How could you prove you're innocent? It's a problem as old as time, and the solutions people came up with in the past are, well, they're both fascinating and honestly pretty terrifying. Today, we're used to the idea of justice involving evidence, testimony, and a jury, right? But just imagine living in a world where your only shot at proving your innocence was to stick your hand in boiling water or carry a glowing hot piece of iron. The difference between their world and ours is just massive. So let's get into why. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to visit an ancient empire that was built on the solid foundation of written law. Then, we'll jump forward to a time that looked for verdicts straight from the heavens. After that, we'll put them head to head and see what their struggles can teach us about our own constant search for justice. All right, our first stop takes us to ancient Babylon and a solution to the justice problem that was totally radical for its time. Don't leave things to chance. Write the rules down in stone for everyone to see. So get this, almost 4,000 years ago, King Hammurabi decided that justice shouldn't just depend on what kind of mood a judge was in. He had 282 laws carved onto a giant stone pillar and put it right in the middle of the city. This was a complete game changer. For the first time, the rules were fixed, they were public, and they were permanent. And these laws were, let's just say, brutally specific. Take a look at this one. There's no wiggle room at all. A specific screw-up, a builder's shoddy work gets someone killed, gets a specific and very final punishment. The goal here wasn't just about being fair, it was about being predictable. The logic behind it was as clear as the writing on that stone. Step 1, a crime happens. Step 2, you look up the specific law that applies. Step 3, you hand out the specific punishment. Boom, done. This was all about trying to take personal revenge and favoritism out of the equation, all to build a stable, orderly society. Now, at the very heart of this code is that famous phrase you've definitely heard, an eye for an eye. And to us, that sounds incredibly harsh, right? But you've got to understand, in an age of endless blood feuds, where taking someone's eye could get your whole family wiped out, this was actually a form of restraint. It meant the punishment could not be worse than the crime. It was about creating balance, not just more violence. Okay, so Hammurabi's system was all about stuff you could see and prove. But what happens when there are no witnesses, when there's no clear proof? For that, we're going to jump thousands of years forward to medieval Europe, which had a completely different answer. When humans couldn't find the truth, they basically just asked God to reveal it. And this brings us to the world of the trial by ordeal. The core belief was pretty simple. If the truth is hidden from people, God will perform a little miracle to show everyone what's what. So justice wasn't really a human decision anymore. It was a divine judgment call. So one of the most common ordeals was by fire. An accused person would have to literally carry a red-hot iron bar for a few steps. Then, their hand was bandaged up and sealed. The moment of truth came 3 days later. If the wound was healing up nicely, without infection, that was it, a miracle, a sign from God that you were innocent. If it was festering, well, you were guilty. And then you had the trial by water. The accused, who was often suspected of something like witchcraft, would be tied up and thrown into a river or a lake that a priest had blessed. But the logic of what happened next, well, it's completely backwards to how we think today. Okay, and this is where it gets really wild. If you sank, it meant the pure, holy water was accepting you. You were innocent, and hopefully they pulled you out in time. But if you floated, that meant the pure water was actively rejecting your evil, corrupted soul. You were guilty. By our standards, it's a total lose-lose situation, but for them, it made perfect divine sense. So, what we have here are two profoundly different paths to justice. One is built on human logic and written down rules. The other is all about faith and divine intervention. Let's put them side by side and see how they stack up. This table really cuts right to the chase. The source of authority for Hammurabi was the state. For the ordeal, it was God. The basis for a verdict? Evidence versus a divine sign. But look at the primary goals. Hammurabi's code was all about creating social order. But the trial by ordeal? It had a much bigger and kind of scarier goal.
It was about revealing God's absolute truth. These aren't just different methods. They're basically from different realities.
So what's the big takeaway here? Both of these systems, as strange as the ordeal seems to us, were really part of the same long, messy human story, the search for a reliable way to find justice. So in the end, these two paths really show a fundamental tension. Hammurabi's code is like the great-great-grandfather of our modern state-run legal systems. And the trial by ordeal, it shows that deep-down human need for absolute certainty, even if it means looking for it in the supernatural. And our system today still has echoes of both, that need for predictable order and that almost sacred quest for the truth. So, why does a 4,000-year-old stone pillar even matter today? Because every single time you argue that laws should be public or that they should apply to everyone equally, you are channeling the spirit of Hammurabi. That revolutionary idea that justice should be written down for all to see, that is his enduring legacy.
And the legacy of the ordeal? Oh, it's just as powerful, but in the complete opposite way. The entire modern principle of separating church and state in court is a direct rejection of that whole system. We, as a society, eventually decided that justice was way too important to leave to divine signs, and that it had to stay firmly in the human world.
Which leaves us with one last, kind of unsettling question. We look back at the trial by ordeal, and we see a system that was barbaric, irrational. But 1,000 years from now, what parts of our own justice system will seem just as strange to our descendants? What's our modern-day ordeal?